Beginning a screencast on the Oresteia papers. We're here with period 3, and we're going to look at some introductions and thesis statements together, just of a few papers. All right? So here we go. In Furies as representations of the sublimation of vengeance into civic justice. You notice my comment here, I said wordy title. That is a wordy title. That's saying a lot in one title. You could simply call this Furies and the Sublimation of Vengeance. That's a pretty good title. In the final play of the Oresteia trilogy, Eumenides, the chorus is comprised of Furies, hideous goddesses that pursue and terrorize murderers relentlessly. Do we really need that sentence? Do we really need that? It's kind of just a summary sentence, right? I mean, anybody who read the play pretty much knows that. They do not consider the motive for the crime. They only ask if the person committed the murder. In the context of the play, the Furies represent the human desire for vengeance. Now we're cooking. Now we're getting somewhere. The play takes place in a time in which justice is defined as taking an eye for an eye. This concept of justice led to vengeance cycles in which people killed others in response to previous murders. As the Greeks discovered, building a stable society with vengeance as the source of justice is nearly impossible. Therefore, the desire for vengeance can be a negative human characteristic and detrimental to civilized society. This human desire cannot be eliminated. It will always be present in society since humans form society. This negative desire must be sublimated in a constructive way to make a stable society. In the Eumenides, this characterization of the Furies as evolving from old irrational justice to new rational justice sublimates the human desire for vengeance into constructive civic justice. You notice the comment I have over here says it's a good overview. And it is a good overview, right? There's nothing really wrong about this. But it stays very close to class notes. Like, for example, would anybody really disagree with this? That's that's something you need. So when I say need a stronger thesis, what I mean is you need a thesis that's more debatable, right? If nobody would disagree with your thesis, it's not really a very good thesis. This is kind of a pretty straightforward representation of what Collard argued, what we talked about in class. It's not wrong. That's why it's not a bad grade, but it's not going to approach that upper B or A range just because it's kind of just giving us back what we already knew. Okay? So you do want to try to break some new ground. All right? Let's take another one. It's going out of focus. Net imagery and the restriction of fate and free will. Now you notice I put a box around fate and free will because that's kind of a confusing conjunction. I don't know if both of them are being restricted. I don't know if net imagery applies to both of them. I don't really understand. One thing I noticed right away is the intro is very brief, right? Net and web imagery have greatly come to associate with. Look at that opening verb phrase. First of all, it does exactly what I said before, where you pile verb upon verb, where you go main verb and then infinitive. You really could just say net imagery is associated with the Oresteia. Christopher Collard describes artifacts from this period of Greek tragedy, including an Attic red figure, wine bowl, a filmy web-like garment, a device both literal and metaphorical, of which Aeschylus makes much. Interesting piece of evidence there, but it's not really telling us why that evidence is there. To antagonists such as Clytemnestra, nets are ideal weapons for trapping murder targets. Amidst schemes of power usurpation, victims such as Agamemnon are enslaved and stripped of free will after being entangled within murderous web instruments, nets, yokes, and robes. You see my question here, with what theme or effect? What is the why? So I'm getting a sense for what X is. X is the net imagery. but I'm not clear on how that connects to why. Um, I'm also not clear on this idea about being stripped of free will by being caught in a net. Um, I mean, certainly being caught in a net means you can't move, but that's not quite the same way as what we mean by not having free will. Like, usually there we mean not having choices. So this very brief intro has some real promise in it. The evidence from Collard about the filmy web-like garments is interesting. I like the idea of the net imagery, but I still need more from a thesis here. All right. Let's take a look at this one. Also a very concise thesis, or very concise intro. But this one I think you're going to see gets a lot more mileage. The first two plays in Aeschylus's Oresteia present readers with a bleak, fatalistic reality. Characters are left helpless and powerless as what must happen is forced upon them. Look at that nice quote there. If I took the quote marks away, could you tell where the quote begins and ends? You can't really tell there. Characters are left helpless and powerless as what must happen is forced upon them. Yeah, the comma should be inside, but that's okay. I'll live with that. Okay? And a key theme of the trilogy is reflecting upon human and divine wills, especially the will of Zeus, who determines men's lives. Another well-used, well-integrated quote. The entire trilogy is rife with figurative language involving animals, and in Agamemnon and Libation Bearers, Aeschylus utilizes animal imagery to emphasize characters' dominance or subordinates. Good. Now I'm starting to see an X to Y connection. Animal imagery and characters' dominance or subordinates. Aeschylus uses predator-prey imagery to establish power dynamics between human characters, but he simultaneously points to a shared human condition of subordination to the gods. Regardless of human hierarchies, this shared condition of inferiority develops the play's theme of human subjugation to divine will. What do you like or dislike about that intro and thesis statement? Yeah, Chase? Yeah, like I like the point he makes about, it's a shared human condition, so there's dominance and subordination, but everybody's subordinate to the gods. Like that's a kind of nice nuance there, right? Good. Yeah, and it only took him let's see, is it just 3 sentences? Yeah, that's a 3-sentence intro, right? That's pretty efficient. That's pretty efficient. And I think pretty clear. I have a good idea of what the argument to follow is, and I have a good idea about what the execution of the argument is going to be. Okay, so that's going to close the screencast.